guys, in this month's Historical Fiction 101, I'm going to be going through the list of nominees in the historical fiction category on Goodreads this year. So, every year, Goodreads has done their annual, vote for your favorite books, whether that be in just general fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and of course my favorite category, the historical fiction category. So I'm just going to be going through the list of 20 books that were nominated this year because a lot of them I've never even heard of, so it's kind of like, okay, I want to know what these books are about. So I'm going to be finding out today about these books, you guys. Quite a number of these I am already aware of, and some of them I do own, but like I said, there is quite a few that it's like, I have never heard of this, what is it about? So yeah, I'm going to be looking at my computer on the Goodreads pages, reading the synopsises. So if you want to go through any more details or look up these books yourselves, head off over to Goodreads. Okay, let's get going, you guys. I'm very excited about this. Starting with Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. Born in a bathtub in 1954 to a Cherokee father and white mother, Betty is the sixth of 8 siblings. The world they inhabit is one of poverty and violence, both from outside the family and also from within. The lush landscape, rich with birdsong, wild fruit, and blazing stars, becomes a kind of refuge for Betty, but when her family's darkest secrets are brought to light, she has no choice but to reckon with the brutal history hiding in the hills, as well as the heart-wrenching cruelties and incredible characters she encounters in her rural town of Breathed, Ohio. But despite the hardship she faces, Betty is resilient. Her curiosity about the natural world, her fierce love for her sisters, and her father's brilliant stories are kindling for the fire of her own imagination. And in the face of all she bears within, Betty discovers an escape. She begins to write. She recounts the horrors of her family's past and present with pen and paper and buries them deep in the dirt. Moments that have stung her so deeply she could not tell them until now. Ooh, that sounds good. Next up, Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman, and to the best of my knowledge, this is a follow-up to Practical Magic. I have never read that book, and I think I have seen the movie. That's the movie that had Sandra Bullock, right? Was it Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman? I can't remember. I believe I have seen that movie. I saw it once, and I honestly can't remember too terribly much about it, so I don't know. In regards to this book, I just know it's a follow-up to Practical Magic, apparently, but taking place in a historical setting. So, let's see. Where does the story of the Owens bloodline begin? With Maria Owens in the 1600s, when she's abandoned in a snowy field in rural England as a baby. Under the care of Hannah Owens, Maria learns about the unnamed arts. Hannah recognizes that Maria has a gift and she teaches the girl all she knows. It is here that she learns her first important lesson: always love someone who will love you back. When Maria is abandoned by the man who has declared his love for her, she follows him into Salem, Massachusetts. Here she invokes the curse that will haunt her family, and it's here that she learns the rules of magic and the lessons that she will carry with her for the rest of her life. Love is the only thing that matters. This actually sounds very good. Like, just as a standalone book, like, do I have to read, Practical Magic? Do I have to actually maybe read that, or can I just read this book as a standalone? Because this actually sounds very good by itself to me. Next, The Paper Daughters of Chinatown by Heather B. Moore. In the late 19th century, San Francisco is a booming city with a dark side, one in which a powerful underground organization, the Criminal Tong, buys and sells young Chinese women into prostitution and slavery. These paper daughters, so called because fake documents gain them entry to America but leave them without legal identity, generally has no recourse, but the Mission Home for Girls is one bright spot of hope and help. Told in alternated chapters, this rich narrative follows the stories of young Donalina Cameron, who works in the mission home, and Maylene, a paper daughter who thinks she is coming to America for an arranged marriage, but instead is sold into a life of shame and despair. Ooh, this sounds like a very tragic, dark book, you guys. Next up, The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. Raised in a wealthy family in Sepphoris with ties to the ruler of Galilee, Anna is rebellious and ambitious, a relentless seeker with a brilliant, curious mind and a daring spirit. She yearns for a pursuit worthy of her life, but finds no outlet for her considerable talents. Defying the expectations placed on women, she engages in scholarly pursuits and writes secret narratives about neglected and silenced women. When she meets the 18-year-old Jesus, each is drawn to and enriched by the other's spiritual and philosophical ideas. He becomes a floodgate for her intellect, but also the awakener of her heart. Their marriage unfolds with love and conflict, humor and pathos in Nazareth, where Anna makes a home with Jesus, his brothers, James and Simon, and their mother, Mary. Here, Anna's pin-up longings intensify amid the turbulent resistance to the Roman occupation of Israel, partially led by her charismatic adopted brother, Judas. Oh my God! I gotta get this book. You guys, she is sustained by her indomitable aunt Yotha, who is searching for her long-lost daughter, as well as by other women, including her friend Tabitha, who was sold into slavery after she was raped. And Pharisees, the shrewd wife of Herod, Anna's impetuous streak occasionally invites danger. When one such foray forces her to flee Nazareth for her safety shortly before Jesus' public ministry begins, she makes her way with Yotha to Alexandria, where she eventually finds refuge and purpose in unexpected surroundings. Oh my God, you guys. You know, I've seen this book. I've seen this book at Barnes & Noble, but I was like, oh, it don't look very good, and I've never read the plot synopsis until now. I had no idea this took place, like, during, you know, the era of Jesus, like Jesus Christ. This sounds very intriguing. I think I gotta get my hands on this, you guys. Is it just me? The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. Escaping from an abusive marriage, 17-year-old Lakshmi makes her way alone to the vibrant 1950s pink city of Jaipur. There she becomes the most highly requested henna artist and confidant to the wealthy women of the upper class. But trusted with the secrets of the wealthy, she can never reveal her own. Known for her original designs and sage advice, Lakshmi must tread carefully to avoid the jealous gossips who could ruin her reputation and her livelihood. As she pursues her dream of an independent life, she is startled one day when she is confronted by her husband, who has tracked her down these many years later with a high-spirited young girl in tow, a sister Lakshmi never knew she had. Suddenly, the caution that she has carefully cultivated as protection is threatened. Still, she perseveres, applying her talents and lifting up those that surround her as she does. Sounds good. The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. This is a book that I do own, but I have not gotten around to it. Just after the Second World War in the small English village of Chawton, an unusual but like-minded group of people band together to attempt something remarkable. 150 years ago, Chawton was the final home of Jane Austen, one of England's finest novelists. Now it's home to a few distant relatives and their diminishing estate. With the last bit of Austen's legacy threatened, a group of disparate individuals come together to preserve both Jane Austen's home and her legacy. These people, a laborer, a young widow, the local doctor, and a movie star, among others, could not be more different, and yet they are united in their love for the works and words of Austen. As each of them endures their own quiet struggle with loss and trauma, some from the recent war, others from more distant tragedies, they rally together to create the Jane Austen Society. I can't wait to get to this sometime in the future, you guys. Where the Lost Wonder by Amy Harmon. Naomi May never expected to be widowed at 20. Eager to leave her grief behind, she sets off with her family for a life out west. On the trail, she forms an instant connection with John Lowry, a half Pawnee man straddling two worlds and a stranger in both. But life in a wagon train is fraught with hardship, fear, and death. Even as John and Naomi are drawn to each other, the trials of the journey and their disparate pasts work to keep them apart. John's heritage gains them safe passage through hostile territory, only to come between them as they seek to build a life together. When a horrific tragedy strikes, decimating Naomi's family and separating her from John, the promise they made are all they have left. Ripped apart, they can't turn back, they can't go on, and they can't let go. Both will have to make terrible sacrifices to find each other, save each other, and eventually make peace with who they are. Ooh, that sounds good. I think I'm going to say that for all these books, you guys. Codename Helene by Ariel Lawhon. You know, this is a book that came out earlier in the year, and I never picked it up, and it's like, I'm wishing I had picked it up. This book is based on the life of Nancy Wake, an Australian expat who worked as a reporter for Hearst in Paris just before World War II and later as a spy for the British. Lawhon throws readers into the middle of the action as Nancy, under the alias Helene, prepares to parachute from an RAF plane into France to help the resistance in 1944, carrying in her head memorized lists of vital data, including bridges targeted for destruction and safe house addresses. After she lands, the story flashes back 8 years as Nancy struggles for respect and recognition as a journalist, despite her first-hand observations of Nazi brutality in 1930s Vienna. Her editor is reluctant to publish a story about what she's seen. Frequent jumps in time draw out the arc of Wake's remarkable life, despite her statement early on that women's weapons of warfare were limited to silk stockings and red lipstick. By the end, she's proven herself skillful at physical combat as well. Ooh, sounds good. I wish I had got this, you guys. The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. Thomas is the night watchman at the jewel bearing plant, the first factory located near the Turtle Mountain Reservation in rural North Dakota. He is also a Chippewa Council member who is trying to understand the consequences of a new emancipation bill on its way to the floor of the United States Congress. It is 1953, and he and the other council members know the bill isn't about freedom. Congress is fed up with Indians. The bill is a termination that threatens the rights of Native Americans to their land and their very identity. How can the government abandon treaties made in good faith with Native Americans for as long as the grasses shall grow and the rivers run? Since graduating high school, Pixie has insisted that everyone call her Patrice. Unlike most of the girls on the reservation, Patrice, the class valedictorian, has no desire to wear herself down with a husband and kids. She makes jewel bearings at the plant, a job that barely pays her enough to support her mother and brother. Patrice's shameful alcoholic father returns home sporadically to terrorize his wife and children and bully her for money. But Patrice needs every penny to follow her beloved older sister Vera, who moved to the big city of Minneapolis. Vera may have disappeared. She hasn't been in touch in months and is rumored to have had a baby. Determined to find Vera and her child, Patrice makes a fateful trip to Minnesota that introduces her to unexpected forms of exploitation and violence and endangers her life. Thomas and Patrice live in this impoverished reservation community along with young Chippewa boxer Wood Mountain and his mother, Juggy Blue, her niece and Patrice's best friend Valentine, and Stack Barnes, the white high school math teacher and boxing coach who is hopelessly in love with Patrice. I feel like this description is a little kind of all over the place. Like, what is the overall plot? It sounds good though. It's just I wish this plot somewhere on Goodreads is a little bit more, narrowed down and more concise, because it feels like it's a little all over the place. It's like trying to tell too much in one go. Next up, The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, and this is book 3 in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy, you guys. I have all of these books now. I can't wait to binge through them all, because I love Tudor England. Anne Boleyn is dead, decapitated in the space of a heartbeat by a hired French executioner. As her remains are bundled into oblivion, Thomas Cromwell breakfasts with the victors. The blacksmith's son from Putney emerges from the Springs bloodbath to continue his climb to power and wealth, while his formidable master Henry VIII settles to short-lived happiness, with his third queen before Jane dies, giving birth to the male heir he most craves. Cromwell is a man with only his wits to rely on. He has no great family to back him, no private army. Despite rebellion at home, traitors plotting abroad, and the threat of invasion testing Henry's regime to the breaking point, Cromwell's robust imagination sees a new country in the mirror of the future. But can a nation or a person shed the past like a skin? Do the dead continually unbury themselves? What will you do? The Spanish ambassador asks Cromwell when the king turns on you, as sooner or later he turns on everyone close to him. Yeah, if you know your Tudor history, you know what happens to Thomas Cromwell. So, yeah, I can guess where this third book is going to go. And, yeah, I can't wait to get to this trilogy, you guys. The Book of Lost Friends by Lisa Wingate. It looks like we have two different settings here taking place both in Louisiana. One is in 1875, one is in 1987. I'm just going to read the historical fiction part for this video purpose. In the tumultuous aftermath of Reconstruction, 3 young women set off as unwilling companions on a perilous quest. Lavinia, the pampered heir to a now destitute plantation, Juno Jane, her illegitimate freeborn Creole half-sister, and Hanny, Lavinia's former slave. Each carries private wounds and powerful secrets as they head for Texas, following dangerous roads rife with ruthless vigilantes and soldiers, still fighting a war lost a decade before. For Lavinia and Juno Jane, the journey is one of inheritance and financial desperation, but for Hanny, torn from her mother and 8 siblings before slavery's end, the pilgrimage westward reignites an agonizing question. Could her long-lost family still be out there? Beyond the swamps lie the seemingly limitless frontiers of Texas and improbably hope. Next up, HAMNET by Maggie O. Farrell, and this is a book that I also have, but I haven't gotten around to. This takes place in England, 1580. A young Latin tutor, penniless, bullied by a violent father, falls in love with an extraordinary, eccentric young woman, a wild creature who walks her family's estate with a falcon on her shoulder and is known throughout the countryside for her unusual gifts as a healer. Agnes understands plants and potions better than she does people, but once she settles with her husband on Henley Street in Stratford, she becomes a fiercely protective mother and a steadfast centrifugal force in the life of her young husband, whose gifts as a writer are just beginning to awaken when his beloved young son succumbs to bubonic plague. And this is essentially focusing on the wife of William Shakespeare. And yeah, if you know kind of the story of Shakespeare, his son Hamnet died very young, very tragic, and that was kind of his inspiration for Hamlet. So yeah, like I said, I have this book, can't wait to get to it, sounds great. I'm glad this was nominated this year. Next up, The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follett. It seems like he's on this list every year. It is 997, the end of the Dark Ages. England is facing attacks from the Welsh in the west and the Vikings in the east. Those in power bend justice according to their will, regardless of ordinary people, and often in conflict with the king. Without a clear rule of law, chaos reigns. In these turbulent times, 3 characters find their lives intertwined. A young boat builder's life is turned upside down when the only home he's ever known is raided by Vikings, forcing him and his family to move and start their lives anew in a small hamlet where he does not fit in. A Norman noblewoman marries for love, following her husband across the sea to a new land, but the customs of her husband's homeland are shockingly different, and she begins to realize that everyone around her is engaged in a constant, brutal battle for power. It becomes clear that a single misstep could be catastrophic. A monk dreams of transforming his humble abbey into a center of learning that will be admired throughout Europe, and each in turn comes into dangerous conflict with a clever and ruthless bishop who will do anything to increase his wealth and power. Oh, that sounds very fascinating, you guys. A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende. In the late 1930s, civil war gripped Spain. When General Franco and his fascists succeeded in overthrowing the government, hundreds of thousands are forced to flee in a treacherous journey over the mountains to the French border. Among them is Roser, a pregnant young widow who finds her life irreversibly intertwined with that of Victor Dalmau, an army doctor and the brother of her deceased love. In order to survive, the two must unite in a marriage neither of them wants, and together are sponsored by poet Pablo Neruda to embark on the SS Winnipeg, along with 2,200 other refugees in search of a new life. And as unlikely partners, they embrace exile and immigrate in Chile as the rest of Europe erupts in World War. Ooh. Utopia Avenue, David Mitchell. Utopia Avenue is the strangest British band you've never heard of, emerging from London's psychedelic scene in 1967 and fronted by folk singer Elf Holloway, guitar demigod Jasper, and blues bassist Dean. Utopia Avenue released only 2 LPs during its brief blazing journey from the clubs of Soho and drafty ballrooms to Top of the Pops, and the cusp of chart success, and on to glory in Amsterdam, prison in Rome, and a fabled American fortnight in autumn of 1968. So this sounds like it's a fictional band, like a rock band, it sounds like, kind of charting their progress from fame and craziness, it sounds like. That sounds cool. The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This is another book that I own, but I have not gotten around to this year. In an Ireland doubly ravaged by war and disease, nurse Julia Power works at an understaffed hospital in the city center, where expectant mothers who have come down with the terrible new flu are quarantined together. Into Julia's regimented world steps 2 outsiders, a Dr. Kathleen Lynn, a rumored rebel on the run from the police, and a young volunteer helper, Bridie Sweeney. In the darkness and intensity of this tiny ward over 3 days, these women change each other's lives in unexpected ways. They lose patience to this baffling pandemic, but they also shepherd new life into a fearful world. With tireless tenderness and humanity, carers and mothers alike somehow do their impossible work. Deacon King Kong, James McBride, in September 1969, a fumbling, cranky old church deacon known as Sportcoat shovels into the courtyard of the Cause House housing project in South Brooklyn, pulls a .38 from his pocket, and in front of everybody shoots the project's drug dealer at point-blank range. Good Lord. In Deacon King Kong, McBride brings to vivid life the people affected by the shooting, the victim, the African American and Latino residents who witnessed it, the white neighbors, the local cops assigned to investigate, the members of the Five Ends Baptist Church where Sportcoat was deacon, the neighborhood's Italian mobsters, and Sportcoat himself. As the story deepens, it becomes clear that the lives of the characters caught in the tumultuous swirl of 1960s New York overlap in unexpected ways. When the truth does emerge, McBride shows us that not all secrets are meant to be hidden, and the best way to grow is to face change without fear, and that the seeds of love lie in hope and compassion. Wow, that sounds like a crazy book. The Book of Lost Names by Kristen Harmel. Once again, another book I own but haven't got to. I'm just so behind. Eve Abrams, a semi-retired librarian in Florida, is shelving books one morning when her eyes lock on a photograph in a magazine line open nearby. She freezes. It's an image of a book she hasn't seen in 65 years, a book she recognizes as The Book of Lost Names. The accompanying article discusses the looting of libraries by the Nazis across Europe during World War II, an experience Ava remembers well, and the search to reunite people with the text taken from them so long ago. The book and the photograph, an 18th century religious text thought to have been taken from France in the waning days of the war, is one of the most fascinating cases. Now housed in a Berlin library, it appears to contain some sort of code, but researchers don't know where it came from or what the code means. Only Ava holds the answers, but will she have the strength to revisit old memories and help reunite those lost during the war? So then, yeah, kind of going back into 1942, Ava was forced to flee Paris after the arrest of her father, a Polish Jew. Finding refuge in a small mountain town in the Free Zone, she begins forging identity documents for Jewish children, fleeing to neutral Switzerland. But erasing people comes with a price, and along with a mysterious, handsome forger named Remy, Ava decides she must find a way to preserve the real names of the children who are too young to remember who they really are. The records they keep in the Book of Lost Names will become even more vital when the resistance cell they work for is betrayed and Remy disappears. Oh my god, sounds good. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. The Vignes twin sisters will always be identical, but after growing up together in a small southern black community and running away at age 16, it's not just the shape of their daily lives that is different as adults, it's everything, their families, their communities, their racial identities. Many years later, one sister lives with her black daughter in the same southern town she once tried to escape. The other secretly passes for white, and her white husband knows nothing of her past. Oh my god! Still, even separated by so many miles and just as many lies, the fates of the twins remain intertwined. What will happen to the next generation when their own daughter's storylines intersect? Oh my goodness, this sounds like a soap opera. And the last book that Goodreads nominated this year for the year of 2020 for historical fiction, Shuggie Bain? Am I pronouncing that right? I think I'm not pronouncing that correct. Shuggie Bain, that's what it looks like to me, by Douglas Stewart. Shuggie Bain is the unforgettable story of young Hugh Shuggie Bain, a sweet and lonely boy who spends his 1980s childhood in rundown public housing in Glasgow, Scotland. Thatcher's policies have put husbands and sons out of work, and the city's notorious drugs epidemic is waiting in the wings. Shuggie's mother, Agnes, walks a wayward path. She is Shuggie's guiding light, but a burden for him and his siblings. She dreams of a house with its own front door while she flicks through the pages of the Freeman's catalog, ordering a little happiness on credit, anything to brighten up her gray life. Married to a philandering taxi driver husband, Agnes keeps her pride by looking good. Her beehive, makeup, and pearly white false teeth offer a glamorous image of Glaswegian Elizabeth Taylor. But under the surface, Agnes finds increasing solace in drink, and she drains away the lion's share of each week's benefits. All the family has to live on cans of extra strong lager hidden in handbags and poured into tea mugs. Agnes's older children find their own ways to get a safe distance from their mother, abandoning Shuggy to care for her as she swings between alcoholic binges and sobriety. Shuggy is meanwhile struggling to somehow become the normal boy he has desperately longed to be. But everyone has realized that he is no right, a boy with a secret that all but him can see. Agnes is supportive of her son, but her addiction has the power to eclipse everyone close to her, even her beloved Shuggy. Oh, this sounds like a kind of like a family tragedy of some sort. So you guys, if you made it through this very long video, good for you. So that is it for the 2020's Goodreads nominations for historical fiction. A lot of these, like I said, several of these I do own, but I haven't read. There are some I have heard of, but there's a good majority of these I've never heard of. So it's always kind of nice to be aware of these other books that I might not ever get around to, and to kind of help you guys be aware as well. So yeah, the big question, do you guys agree with Goodreads nominees this year for historical fiction? Are there other books that you would have preferred to be included in there? Just let me know down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.